Our next speaker is Radhika Dutt. Radhika has been working on a new project, which I think you just named after yourself, let's be honest. Right? It's called Radical Product. And I've been fortunate enough to be able to take some of what she and her team have been working on Radical Product and actually take it out into the world and experiment it within places as diverse as Salt Lake City and recently Lisbon, and have amazing responses to this really, really simple idea that you can bring a vision-led, product-level approach to a business or an idea or a product team to bring it all together and make sense of it. And the reason why it's so powerful is that it's kind of like the E equals MC squared of product. It says so much about everything, but in a simple way that doesn't make it too complicated. We've seen those big flow diagrams of Agile, and we've all had our sleepless nights about them. This is exactly the opposite. It just says, hey, your people need direction. They need a North Star. Give it to them. And you're going to talk a little bit about that today. Correct? Absolutely. Cue the music. Please welcome Radhika Dutt.
So all of the talks have been so interesting that instead of walking all the way from behind, I decided to be right here and actually listen to all the talks. So what I want to talk about today is a practical big idea that's been the foundation of this global movement of product thinking. And it's really important that it's a practical big idea. And there are three underlying concepts behind this big idea. The first is that every one of us is in a product organization, whether we realize it or not. So if you're in a research organization, if you're in a nonprofit, if you're a freelancer, and of course if you're a high-tech startup or a big company, we're all in product organizations because product is how we affect change in the world. And once we think about everything that we do as a product, then we can ask the next question, which is, how do we then build products with purpose? Which brings me to the next core concept, which is every one of us can own the product vision for our product so that we can build products with purpose. This idea of, having a compelling product vision shouldn't be relegated to famous people in black turtlenecks, and really every one of us should own the product vision for our product. Which brings me to the third point, which is that until now, building these products with purpose or these vision-driven products hadn't been easy. There wasn't a clear path for how do you do that. And that's what we're changing. So who are we? Nidhi, Jordi, and I, we got together having worked in a range of different industry verticals. And what brought us together was that, even though we'd been in telecom, AI, ad tech, et cetera, we were seeing the same common product diseases across all these different verticals where good products go bad. And even though we ourselves had been trying to build vision-driven products, we were using our intuition to do that. And while we succeeded, it was also often fraught with mistakes. And it was an inefficient process in general. So we got together with the question, can we do something to help other people build vision-driven products? Can we make it easier for them? So you heard me talk about these product diseases, right? So let's talk about these product diseases openly so that we can ourselves self-diagnose. So product diseases are common but avoidable things. These are problems that basically arise when you see execution that happens in the absence of product vision and strategy. And the thing is, they're really easy to catch. So I don't want to speak from our high horses that, we did this better, right? We ourselves caught these product diseases. It's really easy to catch them. So let's share from our mistakes. And in fact, you can do a checkup with me. And so if you've heard of some of these product diseases, raise your hand. The first one is my favorite, obsessive sales disorder. So this is where, we hear our salesperson say to us, we can win this customer. All we have to do is just add this one custom feature, right? And then soon, by the end of the fiscal year, we're sitting with a stack of contracts, and our entire roadmap is driven by what we need to do to be able to get revenue recognition on that stack of contracts, right? How many of us have seen obsessive sales disorder? Right. The next one is pivotitis. Now, I think, all of us, if we've seen lean startup, right, we've very often seen pivotitis. And that's because, when lean startup is used well, it's great, but often it's taken to mean, let's throw things at the wall, see what sticks, and we'll just pivot until we find product market fit. I was heading up marketing once for a company where we started out as a payments platform. Well, but that was really hard because we had to acquire both merchants and we had to acquire consumers. So soon after, we became a loyalty platform for merchants. But there just wasn't enough of a pain point, and it was such a crowded market. So sometime later, we became a credit solution company for merchants. At the end, I just really didn't know what to write in our brochures. And the last one is strategic swelling. So for all of you designers, you have seen this, right? This is where you have a product that starts out really well. Your customers are loving it. In fact, the next set of customers come along and they say to you, we could use this product too. All you have to do is add these few other features and we could also use it. And you keep adding these features, and over time you have such a bloated product that one fine day you look at this product and you're like, I don't recognize this anymore. I'm not quite sure what it does. Right? How many of us have seen strategic swelling? Right. So the question then is, why can't we just lean and agile our way out of these problems? So while lean and agile, they are great tools to help us save money and do things faster because we do small batch sizes and tight feedback loops. They are great at helping us get to where we need to get to, but they don't help us define where we need to get to. So that's where we need something different. So what is Radical Product? It's a movement of leaders creating vision-driven products. Earlier this morning, we heard Perry talk about a shared language. So Radical Product gives you this shared language so that you can talk about product vision and strategy. How does it fit into the organization? So today you have Lean and Agile, where it helps you on the execution side, and it helps you iterate on your strategy through feedback as you do your execution. Radical Product helps you think about what you're building and why you're building it. Think of it as the precursor to your Lean and Agile execution. The analogy I like to use is, Lean and Agile give you speed, but when you add Radical Product to it, it gives you velocity, because then you have speed and direction. Radical Product doesn't add more process. It's not additional process. It's just really a way of thinking and bringing product thinking into your organization. The other thing I want to mention is that it's all free and open source, that you can download this toolkit, and it helps you with, first of all, the big picture, which is building a clear vision and strategy. And then it helps you translate that so that you can set your priorities and then plan your hypothesis-driven execution. And to me, I think most importantly, aside from just building these things, it also helps you communicate this with your team so that you can align your team and you can collaborate across the organization. So at the very beginning, I said, this was going to be a practical big idea. So we'll really focus on the practicality. And while the tool does, everything from the vision through the execution, today we'll just focus on two things. We'll focus on the vision and a framework for how do you prioritize things. So let's get started with a vision. And what I'll do is I'll use a real-world example. And the example that I'll use is the startup that I had. It was something I founded in 2011, and I sold it in 2014. It was called Likely because it helped you find wines that you're likely to like. So given that I described it as, the Netflix of wine, right? I could write a vision statement that sounds like this: to be the go-to platform for wine education and purchasing. I could have also said to be the leader in. How many of us have heard vision statements like this? Right. So it actually turns out this is not a good vision statement. So the reason it's not a good vision statement is that this, to be the go-to platform, doesn't tell you kind of what do you need to do to actually be that go-to platform. So here's a better vision statement for Likely: to make buying and learning about wine less intimidating and more enjoyable for people who want to drink good wine but don't have the time to become experts. Now this tells you, for whom you want to change the world and what that world looks like once you've changed it. So what's really the key to a good vision? The biggest thing is that it's not about you. It's not your aspiration of what you want to be. It's about a problem that you want to see solved in the world that even if you were out of the picture, you would just be really happy to see this problem solved. So there are really three things to a good vision, right? One, which we said, it's centered on the problem. The second is that it has to be shared by both your team and your customers. And that's actually why to be the leader in is not a good vision statement, because your customers actually don't care whether you're the leader in something or not. They just really want to see the problem solved. And the last is that it has to help your team visualize this concrete end state of the world. So what we created is this radical vision worksheet. And this is so that, instead of handing someone a blank sheet of paper and saying to them, write down your vision, which is just really hard and you get stuck in the words, by creating this, fill-in-the-blank statement, you can actually iterate on the vision together with your team. So if I were to fill this out for Likely, it would read something like this: today, when amateur wine drinkers want to try good wines and learn about wine, they have to pick attractive-looking bottles in the wine store or buy wines that are on sale. This is unacceptable because it leads to hits and misses, mostly misses, and it's really hard to learn about wine this way. We envision a world where buying wines is as simple as renting movies on Netflix, and we're bringing about this world through a recommendations engine that matches your taste to wines, and an operational setup that quickly brings these wines to your table. Now the question is, this reads a little long and maybe even a little awkwardly. So shouldn't my vision be inspiring? Shouldn't it be inspiring so that I can get people to join me on this journey? So that's why we actually call this the source code of your vision. So there's your source code of your vision because this is not what you would publish on your website. Your marketing team, in fact, will compile and create a clean build, and that's what you would publish on your website. But this is the source code that you would put up in your conference room so that when you're in the middle of a heated debate together with your team, you can look at this source code and say, are we being true to our vision? The one other thing that I want to mention is the difference between the company level mission and your product vision. I had said that every one of us needs to own our product vision. Well, it's great when we have big ideas for a company mission, right? So for instance, SpaceX has the company mission that they want to colonize Mars and help us travel to the stars. Well, if you hand a vision statement like that to the poor product manager who is working on reusable rockets, they would be really lost. So every product manager would create their own product vision for their product, and you just have to make sure that it aligns to the vision that's above you. Well, so now we have a vision statement, right? So we can start marching towards it. But we live in this world that's not ideal, and our decisions are not just based on does something help us reach our vision or not. We have to think about this pesky problem of survival, right? Aside from reaching our vision, can we actually survive long enough to reach our vision? So this question of survivability is what we're calling sustainability. And the sustainability is where we ask ourselves this question, what could kill our product tomorrow? So these aren't just trivial risks. These are really existential risks that we have to ask ourselves about. And these are a few examples, but really, depending on your scenario, there could be others that are not on this list. For likely, for instance, legal and regulatory risk was a big one, where there's a quagmire of laws about whether you can ship wines to certain states or not, what license you hold. And so for us, we had to tread carefully to make sure we were doing the right thing on the legal and regulatory risk. There are some companies who will say, we really don't care about this. For instance, Uber would be one of those. One other risk that I want to touch on that's not an obvious one is the stakeholder risk. So if you're in a big company, maybe none of these other risks really apply to you. Even having a P&L that's in the red may not kill your product tomorrow. What might kill your product is stakeholder risk, where you may have a corporate sponsor, a stakeholder, who could kill your product if they really don't approve of what you're doing. But by defining this sustainability for your product, you can then start to balance how do you achieve your vision while trading off against these risks. So let's define what's the biggest risk for likely. And the way we can do that is by using the sustainability statement so that we can identify that one biggest risk instead of trying to create a multidimensional matrix in prioritization and thinking about all of those risks that I've listed. So for likely, our sustainability statement would read something like this. Currently, the greatest risk to our product's existence is that we're unable to raise a Series A. If this happens, we won't be able to continue to operate because we can't make payroll. This risk will most likely come true if we are unable to demonstrate traction. And some factors that could help us mitigate this risk are being able to demonstrate traction through a strong conversion funnel. And we actually listed some of these conversion metrics. So now, once we have a vision statement and we have a sustainability statement, we can start to evaluate opportunities or our strategy on this 2x2 matrix, where something that helps you reach your vision and it's sustainable, of course, that's ideal. But the trickier quadrants are really the two, investing in the vision and the vision debt quadrant. So remember that obsessive sales disorder that I talked about? That's where we start to build vision debt, where we start to deviate from our vision and we take on vision debt so that we can be sustainable in the short term. But if we start to add too much vision debt, instead of looking like a product company, we start to look like a services company. So building vision debt, it's not to say that we never take on these sales deals, right? As long as we have this common shared language where we can talk about it and we say, we all recognize we're adding this vision debt, we then can take on this vision debt very carefully and strategically. The other one is investing in the vision, where we just have to be cognizant of, can we afford to invest in the vision and do something that helps us achieve our vision, but in the short term, it's not sustainable. So if I were to evaluate Likely's strategy on this vision fit versus sustainability, these are the RDCL elements of, so radical strategy elements. But I won't go into radical strategy. There's something, I leave it to you to look up afterwards. But I'll just talk about a couple of elements of our strategy that are in the different quadrants. One that is in the ideal quadrant is that we figured out a subscription model so that you can take wine learning courses and you can basically graduate through wine learning by drinking. What's not to like, right? So that was sustainable and a good vision fit, so ideal. Something that was in the vision debt quadrant for us was, just to help people go through this conversion funnel, we would show them Robert Parker wine ratings. Is everyone familiar with Robert Parker ratings? Right, so that's like the 90-point ratings, et cetera. So it's not a good vision fit because it has nothing to do with your personal tastes. But at the same time, it helped us with our conversion metrics. And so we would take on this vision debt to be able to get people over that hurdle. And in terms of investing in the vision, we knew we needed to build automation so that we could integrate with wine stores. But we invested in it as and when we could, based on our funding. So now that I've talked about Likely and evaluating our strategy on this vision versus sustainability, let's talk about a really public example of a product release that went wrong. How many of us have heard about the Snapchat, the redesign disaster that happened? OK, great. So just for a few of us who haven't, Snapchat at the end of last year launched a redesign because they were facing tremendous market pressure on their revenues. Their competitors were crushing them, so they launched this redesign that earned them almost 1.3 million petitions on change.org with people saying, please roll these changes back. So what went wrong? Snapchat tried to say that you'll get used to it, change is hard, just stick with it. But in the end, they had to give in, and they actually rolled back the changes. What can we learn from this? And how can we apply radical product thinking to this? So let's evaluate the features that they released in that redesign on this vision versus sustainability. The first feature was that they had a discover section where you would browse through stories created by your friends. And as you kept browsing through those stories from your friends, you would then get to stories created by brands and celebrities. But if you're trying to increase revenues, getting to those stories is all the way down after you've scrolled, right? So what do? You move those stories from brands all the way up. And so they moved stories from friends out of the discover section so that brand stories could be all the way to the top. But what does that mean from a user perspective? That means that it's much harder now for you to find stories created by your friends. And so it's not a good vision fit, but hey, it helps you in terms of sustainability. The second feature was that they said, remember these stories by friends that they moved out of the discover section? They said, well, right now, most of our users are using this as a chat application. And actually, let me step back for a second. We should define vision and sustainability for Snapchat, right? Snapchat's vision was that they were a tool targeted at youth so that youth could communicate in a way that's ephemeral and intimate. And so people were mostly using it as a chat app with friends and family. And in terms of sustainability, we talked already about the market pressures. It was really about financial risk. So when you're mixing stories and chats, their reason was that chats were not monetizable but stories were monetizable because you inserted advertising between stories. And so now mixing stories with chat meant better sustainability, but now it was much harder for people to find chats with their friends. So if you're mostly using it as a chat app where you're trying to communicate with your friend, this definitely fell in the vision debt category because it was not a good vision fit. And now the last one. If you thought the previous two were vision debt, this last one definitely was. It was algorithmic sorting, where algorithmic sorting is great for revenues again because this helps you in terms of ad placement. But algorithmic sorting meant that they were ordering both the chats and stories not in reverse chronological order, but based on whatever the algorithm thought that you would want to see first and which friends it thought you cared about. So the equivalent of this is imagine your messaging app just starts to prioritize messages not based on when they arrived, but based on who it thinks you think is important. I mean, you'd be signing a change.org petition too. So, I think looking at this, we can say it's kind of clear why they had a rebellion on their hands. They had all of their key features in this vision debt category. So what can we learn from this? If we are evaluating a product release, features in our backlog, by plotting it on this vision fit versus sustainability, we can get a visual perspective of how are we trading off vision versus our short-term risk. So now that we've talked about, radical product thinking, the next question is, how can you plug this into what you're doing today? And the answer to that is easy. I mean, if you're using Lean and Agile, great, keep using them. And this is just a way of thinking that you would add in so that whether you're in a strategy meeting as an executive leadership team, or you're a product manager doing a product, your sprint planning meeting, you can use this approach and this shared language so that you can start to apply this thinking in your Lean and Agile execution. So what's next? You can download the free and open source toolkit. It also contains 3 other elements that we've not talked about today. So one is the RDCL, the radical strategy. The second is how do you build a cross-functional strategic roadmap so that you can influence functions across the organization. And the third is how do you build a hypothesis-driven execution and measurement model that's driven by your vision and strategy. And you can read more about a lot of the tips and tricks and ideas for doing this on our blog, which is accessible from radicalproduct.com. Our vision is to cure these product diseases. I want to also clarify that this is not about monetization for us right now. This is really with the vision of curing these product diseases. So we hope you'll join the cure and spread the word on this product thinking so that we can all cure these product diseases together. And along the way, as you're bringing radical product thinking into your organization, if you have questions, please feel free to reach out. Also, if you have aha moments that you'd like to share, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you.